Welcome to Rekindled Faith with Melanie Beerda. Whether you've been wrestling with questions, facing doubt, or simply just uninspired, let's dive into what it means to be authentic followers of Christ. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rekindled Faith. My name is Melanie Beerda. I am the founder and the host of this wonderful podcast, and today we have with us a guest. His name is Greg Harris, and Greg, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Greg, and I live out here in kind of the suburbs of Vancouver. I pastor a church in Langley called Southridge, and I live on kind of the western part of Abbotsford. So it's about a 15, 20-minute commute, or 30-minute commute, depending on the highway one that day. I'm married to Sarah. We've been married since 2011, so coming up on 15 years here. We have 3 kiddos. My oldest is Benji, and my middle one is Emily, and my youngest is Oliver. And I think I'm chatting with you here today because of kind of the intersection of the local church and theology and disability, and kind of how those things all come together in one little mess. My entry point into the world of disability theology and that area of life comes through my oldest son, who has some different diagnoses. He's on the autism spectrum. He also has a rare genetic deletion. So for those of you who aren't super in the know of those things, like I was 10 years ago, not in the loop of those things, Down syndrome is maybe one of the more well-known genetic disabilities that has an added chromosome. And so my son doesn't have Down syndrome. He has a genetic deletion in one of his chromosomes. So that just plays out in different developmental and communicative and other kind of things. So he would be considered like moderately disabled. So he can walk and he can feed himself. But there's a lot of other kind of life stuff that we help him with, and he's non-speaking. So that's kind of, and then I have other children too, who are their own fearfully, wonderfully made individuals with their own strengths and joys and challenges, and yeah. So right now I'm working on a dissertation. Actually, before we were recording, we were talking about dissertations and podcasts and how they're kind of similar, that you put a ton of work into this thing and like maybe hopefully 10 people engage with it. And if not, at least we did, right? And so my area is in the area of the local church and disability. And so, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. And I know we connected at the Apologetics Canada conference and very briefly talked about your son and just your experience with being in the church and having a child that does have a disability and just some of the things that you've experienced through that. So I'm really excited for this conversation. But before we start, I wonder, I love God and I love how he can give us situations or experiences in life that we can at first be like, uh-oh, what do I do with this? I have no experience on this. I don't know what to do. But through that process, it's like a formation of developing these skills and this new perspective, this new understanding and new appreciation for life and relationship and all those things. So first of all, I'm curious, what was your previous experience with people with disabilities prior to your son being born?
Yeah, great question. So my mom was a special education teacher for a long time. And so, once in a while, I would be in her office or whatever and be around some of her students who had disabilities. There was 1 or 2 people in the church that I grew up at who were older adults with disabilities. And yeah, in my school days, there was a few one particular friend, guy in my grade who had I think he has Down syndrome. Um, but yeah, I would say like in general, it was very not on my radar. I would say that my typical, instinctive response around people with disabilities prior to having Benji was discomfort and like a not knowing how to be around them. A real, I wouldn't say like a calloused or a hard heart towards them, but I would just be very unsure how to be around them, which then caused a lot of insecurity in me and made me mostly just avoid them. And I used like in my mind very like me and them language, like they were very different from me. I would even, in my kind of teenage years and early 20s, like I probably threw the R word around more than I should have, as a word to cover something that was either like funny or dumb or something that you wouldn't want, something that you would want to reject. And I still hear Christians using that now, and I usually when I hear them use it offhand, I'm like, hey, you shouldn't use that word, and here's why. And usually when Christians are like kindly confronted with that, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I don't even know why that word is in my vocabulary anyways. But yeah, I would say I was kind of your like typical like Christian guy who didn't have a lot of disabled people in my life, and so I was uncomfortable and insecure around them, and it made me mostly just avoid them.
Thank you for that. That's vulnerable. And I can relate. For myself, I remember in elementary school, there was one girl. I'm not sure what her disability was, but she was in a wheelchair. She was verbal in making sounds, but she couldn't talk. So she often, like, her workers would do sign language with her. So I used to like sign like I love you to her, and she would just get so excited and just like so much joy from that. And I love that every time I saw her in the hallway, I would do sign language to her. But apart from that, I feel the same as you. It was kind of a discomfort of not really knowing how to meet people where they were at because I don't understand what it is that they're experiencing. And so I was like that too growing up in high school and everything. I would just kind of, okay, like hi, but like continue on my way type of thing. So my mom works as an EA, so she's worked with different types of people with different types of learning struggles. So I look up to her and her desire to come alongside people that maybe have experienced a little bit more of being brushed off by society. And I look up to her and the work that she does and everything. And I think that it's good work. Like it's holy work of loving people that maybe seem a little bit more different than the average person, but still have the same amount of value as every single one of us. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's interesting how most people in the realm of disability theology or disability ministry or whatever you want to call it, they do have some personal connection to it. And actually, Statistics Canada would be telling us like 1 in 5 Canadians live with some sort of diagnosed disability. A lot of, we're in a era now where things like autism and other, neurodiversities are normalized, ADHD, ADD, other things that that have, it's a complicated conversation because for some people they would resonate with the tag of disability and other people don't. And so even, in this conversation, I'll probably mostly use the language of like a disabled person, because there's a whole conversation around do you use person first language, a person with disability? Do you use disability first language of disabled person? And different advocates, self advocates, and others prefer different ways of talking about it. And I usually find that almost everyone can read people's intent and tone and care more than they are trying to police particular words that you use. And so, there's a difference, but that people can just kind of feel and catch about other conversation partners where they're like, oh, you're just doing your best to use words that honor the personhood of individuals and that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, it is, I have come to find it is a whole world of thought and of practice and study that is largely untapped by the rest of the Christian world. And yeah, so I'm happy to be a part of this conversation with you about it.
I'm happy to have you. And I love the fact that you are a father of somebody that has a disability, but you're also a pastor and you're also researching this for your dissertation. So you are in it, fully in it. And so I would love to kind of pick your brain a little bit on those three different aspects of what you're learning. So from the fatherhood perspective, and maybe helping other people to understand or just recognize different ways that we can create a more inclusive environment, or kind of like shaving away that fear of engaging with somebody with a disability. If you could speak as a father on that, and then also the pastor perspective, and then also from the researching perspective.
Yeah, fun. Yeah, so something I've come to learn over time is that we need to differentiate in our minds someone's cognitive capacity with their communicative ability. So, I understand what we mean when we say that person has a cognitive disability. But the only way we know if someone has a cognitive disability or not is by their reliability in communicating what is going on in their mind. We have no other way of being able to understand someone's cognitive capacities outside of their communicative abilities. And so really I think what we need to do, and some people will push back on this, and that's totally fine, but I do think we need to hold the language of cognitive disability super loosely, because what I do believe that cognitive skill exists on a spectrum, just like other skills, athletic or artistic or whatever. So I don't want to say that everyone has equal cognitive abilities, because I don't think that's true. But I think when we allow ourselves to use language like that person has a cognitive disability, what we tend to do is patronize them and talk down, condescend to them in a way that is just really unkind. And so one of the things that I have come to learn is that my son has a cognitive capacity that far outweighs his communicative abilities. When we came to learn this, so my son is a sensory seeker, which means, the more music, the more pressure, the more noise, the more lights, the better. It's the removal of sensory stuff dysregulates him. The increase of sensory will stabilize and regulate him. So like he is happiest at an amusement park on the biggest rides possible, where he is spinning and moving and there's wind and there's noise, and that is like the best. And he has to he walks around with an iPad most of the time, and he has on his iPad usually the show Paw Patrol, but he doesn't like I have two other kids, and when you give them an iPad, they like lock in and the world is dead to them. But when my oldest has his iPad, it actually opens him up to the world. It becomes a way in which he can um, actually have a bridge to the rest of the community as opposed to locking him away from the community. And so I, as a dad, had to, and my wife and I, as parents, we had to fight the social stigmatism over screens. When before we had our son, we were like, we're only going to have wood blocks as toys and books and outdoor play. And if there's a screen involved, we're watching a family movie or whatever. And then we have our first child, and that whole, no one is a better, more organized parent than someone who doesn't have children. Like they know how to write the book. The rest of us who have kids are like, we're barely making it. We don't know what we're doing. So my wife and I were like, what we found actually was we learned about Benji's need for sensory input when we were working with a dietitian, trying to get him to transfer from into a solid food diet. And he was having a really hard time with the different textures of solid food. And he just wasn't able to eat it. And we had a dietitian tell us, you know what might help his oral sensory is if you overwhelm his other senses. Like if you give him loud, bright screen in front of him. And we were like, oh, like we don't want to do that. They're like, okay, or he might not acquire the skill to eat. And we're like, okay, well, like helping him acquire the skill to eat orally is a more valuable thing than us and our like values of no screens in the house kind of a thing. So we put an iPad in front of him and blare the music, and there's the cartoon. I think it was Bubble Guppies or something like that at the time. And we give him the applesauce, and he starts eating it. And we were like, okay, so I guess he's going to use screens at mealtime so that he can eat. And then over the years, what we were finding was when the screen would go away, it would be dysregulating for him, and all the things we're reading, all the research, Jonathan Haidt's telling us the screen time this and screen time that. And so I know anxious generation, I know that's what we're supposed to do, but then our son is not, there's a difference between helping a child, come out of a tantrum and a dysregulated state of a child with disabilities. Those are two different kinds of experiences. I know because I have other children who don't have disabilities, and I know how to help them navigate those tantrums. And so, we started letting him use his screen more and more, and we found that it actually enabled him to participate in social life rather than lock him away from social life. And so he walks around with an iPad, and he's, people will, what we found though about his cognitive life, to circle back to that, was he was actually he would always be scrolling through Paw Patrol. Like he never watches an episode. He never just sits and watches it. He's always scrolling, changing the episodes, scrolling to different parts, finding them. And what we found was he actually had, I think, like memorized episodes, and he would use clips from the episodes that were socially relevant to the situation he was in. So, my mother-in-law, his Nana, her name was Louise, and she was over one day, and she was, talking about one of her neighbors, and her neighbor was doing this or that or whatever. And Benji comes up to the table where she's chatting with my wife, and he goes to the clip of Paw Patrol where the character says, "Geez Louise." And he plays "Geez Louise" like 3 times and then kind of giggles and walks away, right? Like very clearly engaging in the social context with his screen. So we have learned to kind of attune ourselves to what he is doing on his iPad with Paw Patrol, because there will be times which he engages in the moment with a clip, which is like remarkable cognitively, to be able to know what episode, what clip, what place, and to navigate that quick enough to engage socially. Like that's a skill, a communicative skill that he has learned to acquire. We first learned he had it. My wife is a photographer, and she was away out of town for a wedding, and she came back and saw him and was like, "Hey, Benji, I missed you, buddy. And how are you?" And he was really sad and crying. And she was like, "Okay, buddy, I love you." And she went off to do something in the other part of the room. And she could hear Paw Patrol in the background where he went to a clip that said, "I bet you miss your mom." And he played it like 4 times over. And she went over and she was like, "Buddy, you're totally like talking to me through this." And so now he's working on a different communication method that's called spelling to communicate. It's very controversial in the formal speech language pathology realm for all kinds of reasons. But we have found it to be one of the only things to really start helping him get out what is in him. And so he might get to a point where he can be more open in his communication, where he can, contribute how he wants to without having to use a clip of an episode. We hope he does, but in the meantime, we're working with him in the trenches on it, and we are just trying to affirm to him, like, buddy, we know you're in there. We know you're smart. He has this thing that it's called apraxia, which means like a, and praxic is like the inability to do what he wants to do, right? Like how atheism is the absence of the belief in God, apraxia is the absence of the ability to do what you want. So it's like a body control piece, which is, you need a lot of body control to speak, because your tongue is a muscle that requires all kinds of control, and you need body control to do all kinds of communicative things that his body just doesn't have the same level of control. So for Christians, I talk about it like Romans 7, like, he can't do the things he wants to do, and the things he doesn't want to do, he does. Like he has this, they call it like a brain body disconnect between his internal cognitive life and what his body does on the outside. So there's a lot of like motor looping, a lot of, just kind of body. It's not just body ticks. It's like he'll walk in similar patterns around the house. He'll if he walks through the kitchen, he will have to open certain doors, and he'll have to open certain things. Just be like, it's like this impulsive body control thing that is not intentional, and so it brings with it different challenges. But what I would say, one of the primary things that I've learned about persons with disabilities is to never underestimate their internal cognitive life, because we have the kindest thing, and I think the most Christian thing, if we believe that every person was fearfully and wonderfully made by God, and that every person has equal value regardless of what they can contribute to a society. I think every person requires of us to give them respect, to speak with them a way that we would want to be spoken to if we were their age. And so I try to engage people with disabilities way more chronologically now than I do whatever a diagnosis might say, how old they are cognitively. And since we started talking to my son at his chronological age, so many of his behaviors went away that were problematic. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Because, like, could you imagine being talked down to as though you weren't your age, just because someone told you you didn't have the ability to prove to them your internal life, and so therefore they slapped a cognitive level on you, and now they treat you that way? I would be so frustrated all day long if people treated me like that. So I just try to golden rule it and say, if I was that person, how would I want to be spoken to? And let's presume competence. And if they don't understand all of it, that's okay. At least they know we see them. So
That's
yeah.
so good. Even as you're sharing, I'm thinking about my son. He's 6, and sometimes he'll like take a little bit longer to say what he wants to say. And if I cut him off, or if I'm trying to rush him or something, if I'm trying to get somewhere and do something, he gets so frustrated because he's trying to speak and I'm not allowing him the space to speak. So I even think like his reaction to that, and like you say, I can't imagine having that sense of you know what you want to say, but you can't really say it. And then people are just more dismissive than actually giving you the space and time to just be present with you. And I think, like, as a parent for myself, like, I'm trying to slow down and not rush my kids through everything, because I think that we live in a hustle culture where it's like, if you can't keep up, then you're just not coming. That's it. That's a new perspective and a new understanding that I hope that the listeners are catching on to here.
I would do that. What we should do is presume
Yes.
cognitive competence.
Yes, that's one.
Presume that the person you're speaking to has the capacity to engage with you at age appropriate level. So when you speak to a 5-year-old, you can presume that they are going to understand you at a 5-year-old level. Some 5-year-olds can understand you at a level way higher. And again, cognition is a skill, so there can be a spectrum. But the older the person gets, the more you need, I think, to honor them in the way you speak with them and acknowledge them. And I think coming to a young adult or someone in their midlife or a senior citizen with disabilities and speaking to them like they are a little child, I understand the impulse, because what we're trying to do is connect. What we're trying to do is say, like, I see you, and I want you to feel seen. But we can do that and not talk to them like they're a baby. We can do that.
I was just going to ask, because my kids don't like it when grown-ups talk to them like they're a baby. Like, oh, how are you today? Oh, you're so cute. Like, they hate that. So do you find, because your son, he's 10?
Yeah, he's in grade 6, so
He's in
he
grade
will be
6.
12 in summer. Yeah.
Okay, 12. So do you find that people still talk to him like a baby,
Oh
like the
yeah,
baby talk?
all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that drives my 6-year-old nuts. So I can
yeah,
imagine a 12-year-old. Oh,
yeah. And he gets dysregulated. There's people in his life who will speak to him at that level, and they're like, yeah, he seemed frustrated today. I'm like, I bet,
yeah.
because I would also be frustrated if I spent 3 hours with you and you talked to me like that.
Same.
So, like, I get it.
It's good to hear, because then we can make those changes.
Another little like life hack for people who are kind of new to the disability world is, with that presumption of competence. What we need to do is, like, so say you're with a person who, or you engage someone in a mall, or you understand the percentages of the population of people who have disabilities when you go to public places like malls and swimming pools and other places, because that's where the population is kind of its most democratized, it's most like broad and true. So say you're at a mall and you see someone with a disability, and you just finished listening to this podcast, so you're gonna like try to be like awesome in this world for like a week or something. And you see someone with a disability and they might have a caretaker with them. My encouragement to you is, don't engage the caretaker first about the person with the disability. Engage the person with the disability. The caretaker can be there to help as needed, but that person is there to help where there are limitations of that person, not to replace that person. So, like, engage with the person with the disability as a full person rather than as needing a conduit of their caretaker. That is one of, I think, the easiest changes we can make in our engagement with persons with disabilities when we see them with the caretaker, is, to not just like look at them with a like a condescending smile, but to like greet them as you would any other person, and not overdo it, but just like, greet them like you would any other human person. And the caretaker will know how to help that person engage in that setting probably better than you will. And so you can lean on that person's expertise, but that shouldn't replace our just treating them like a person that is worthy of a greeting and a hello. And in a church context, like, you have sometimes that extra second, that extra, you'll see them more frequently, and so you can build that relationship over time.
Yeah, that's good. I'm even thinking as you're talking too, I feel like humanity as a whole has this loneliness to it right now, where we all feel kind of isolated and disconnected in ways in a relationship. And what a way that we can speak life into people that, like we talked about earlier in this podcast, like our initial reaction is to kind of steer clear because we don't understand, but we could literally speak life into these people and build them up and encourage them just by saying hi, right? So
Hmm.
I feel like we overcomplicate things sometimes as
Abs-
humans.
Absolutely. And we do it out of fear, or we do it out of insecurity. And um, yeah, I think we just have to push through some of those things. And um, yeah, and I think one of the other pieces to that is I've really come to see through my thinking in the area of disability that it's really just contemplating the human experience is what it is. The disabled experience is the human experience. It isn't different than the rest of what us quote unquote non-disabled people experience. We have limitations. We have needs. We Disability is one of the only identity markers that we use in the world that we all will eventually have if we live long enough. Uh, we all had them when we were infants. And if the Lord delays and we get the opportunity to live that long, we will all have them. So, this is a huge part of just understanding the human experience of I am one of the main things it means to be human by definition is that we aren't God, which means we aren't infinite, we aren't limitless, we are finite and limited creatures, and we are designed intentionally by God to be our particular version of limited, our particular version of finite. And God could have made each and every one of us different than we are in different places, in different cultures, in different times, with different identity markers. And he chose not to be making us that way. Instead, he chose to make us the way we are and with our particular set of limitations. And so when you realize that the disabled experience is just the human experience, it in some of our minds elevates the experience of others and also levels out the experience of the other people, because we're like, oh, we're all actually just in this human experience together. And some people refer to the disabled experience of some self advocates who live with different disabilities, say like with a cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or something like that, which may be more or less visible to people. They'll say like my experience is just the human experience in a like more potent way. Um, and some of us who don't have the same disabilities have just more of a like watered down version for this season, because that's the thing about disability, like it's coming for you. If you're an injury away, you are a bad shoulder check away from a very different life experience than what you currently have. And not only that, just as the natural process of aging takes its place in a fallen world, there will be ways in which your body breaks down that you will now know what it is like for others to have a world that is not designed for them to encounter it well. And yeah, either people around you will rally and help you navigate the world that is designed harshly for you, or you will drift into loneliness and isolation and despair. And this is where, what the church can be in this season is something completely unlike any other social institution out there. We can be the place that recognizes the full humanity of each person and be present with them in the midst of their limitations and finitude. And man, what an apologetic to the watching world to be that kind of place.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of a verse, James 1:27. Pure and genuine religion in sight of God the Father is caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. That's what comes
Mm,
to mind for me.
mhm,
Because
mhm,
Christianity throughout history, which I think is beautiful, has come alongside people that have been outcasts or set apart, um, like cut off from the main society. Christianity has been there to come alongside those people. And I think that's beautiful. If the church is doing the work of God, then it should be more aware of the people that are a little bit more vulnerable, I guess, and pulling them in and creating a space for them. And I think that's something that society as a whole hasn't really recognized. Maybe in part because they're just blinded to it. Maybe in part because sometimes the louder Christians are not necessarily representing it very well. And but even hospitals, I haven't researched this myself, maybe you know more, but hospitals were created by Christians, and universities were created by Christians. So a lot of these really good things that were created came from people that held to a Christian belief system. So, but yeah, that verse just comes to mind because, pure and genuine religion inside of God the Father is caring for those that need more help from us, that we're not so focused on ourselves and our own stories and our own wants and needs and desires, but that we're coming alongside other people and equipping them to be able to flourish in the life that they're given as well.
absolutely. And you saying that sparked something in my mind because in disability theology in the field, there's a lot of work that is done on 1 Corinthians 12, which is great because that's, the body imagery. That's Paul talking about each part of the body's needed. And so you have this, no one part of the body is allowed to self-exclude themselves because they say, oh, because I'm not a hand, I don't belong to the body. It's like, no, you can't exclude yourself from the body, but neither can other parts of the body exclude others, right? We can't say, oh, because you're not a foot, you don't belong to the body. So there is this, like, um, I can't exclude myself from the church, and I also can't exclude anyone else from the church. But one thing that hasn't been looked at a lot in disability theology, and this is where some of my own kind of thinking and research is going when it comes to disability in the church, is actually that 1 Corinthians 12 comes out of, unsurprisingly, 1 Corinthians 11, which is, we know that as kind of the baptism, or sorry, the Lord's Supper text. This is the text that your pastor probably reads from when he or she is doing the Lord's Supper and saying, we now receive what was given to us, that the night when he was betrayed, Jesus took the bread and he took the cup. But what we don't always recognize is the context where 1 Corinthians 11 is coming out of, which is Paul's really harsh judgment of the Corinthian church for the way in which they chose to organize their gathering. Because the way they chose to organize their gathering was such that there were some people who, not for lack of desire, but for lack of capacity and ability, were excluded from the Lord's table. These people are excluded, we think, likely because of poverty, likely because they were working longer and so they weren't able to make it to the gathering in time. And so the more wealthier Christians who didn't have to work as long of a day were more kind of self reliant financially. They could enjoy a lot of bread and a lot of wine, and they chose to do church in a way that uh, prioritized and literally catered to the preferences of the wealthy at the disposal of others in the body. And Paul comes to them and says, it would be better if you didn't even gather. Like, some of you are leaving hungry and others of you are leaving drunk. And what, you want me to commend you for this? And this is where then he leads into 12, where he's like, every part of the body is necessary. You need those people that you're excluding from participating by the way you're choosing to organize your services. You need them to be part of the body, and they can't say, oh, it's fine, I don't need to be there, like, I get it, like, oh, sorry I had to work so late, like, I didn't want to hold you up, like, I don't, it's fine, I don't need to be there, like, start without me. And that's not an option, and neither is an option for you to be like, we don't need them, like, we can do our thing without them here, it's fine, we can move forward. And Paul's like, this is why some of you are dying, like, this is why you're sick, is that you're organizing your worship of the Lord in such a way that caters to the preferences and desires of a privileged, and is choosing to exclude people. And man, what a word for the church today in North America. We are, so here's my hot take. I think one of the reasons why the church in North America is toxically unhealthy is because we have chosen to organize ourselves in a way that we are content with excluding people who belong to the body by the way we run our services that caters to those of us with the privileges. The fact that we can't imagine in the local church ways of doing church that would include persons with profound disabilities, because we would see them as too big of a disruption to what's really happening, the really important stuff that's happening on a Sunday morning, that these parts of the body aren't full participation with, because they would like, what, wreck the thing we're doing. This is, one of the things my wife has always encouraged me to do is like make people say the thing out loud, like make the internal logic of our decision making, make us say the thing out loud, which is basically that we would prefer to have a room that is quiet so that we could hear the sermon well. And we're so committed to that we would rather not have certain persons in the room, because they might be hooked up to certain machines that are loud, and that loud machine is going to distract from the quiet of the room, which means we won't be able to hear the pastor's whisper at the end of his point. Like, really? I think the Apostle Paul would be like, you think you're doing well here? And look, I'm a pastor. I get it. I get like, we inhabit a culture and a history, and we inhabit buildings, and we inhabit liturgies that are built over time. And there are good reasons to do the things that we're doing. Like, our church is not some paragon of disability inclusion. We are fumbling and stumbling our way through this just like everybody else. But it does make a difference when you start actually seeing the problems of how we do church. And that this is a critique of the North American church, is that we are choosing to do church in ways that we are content with the exclusion of certain persons. And if we're actually, sorry, you go, you're leaning into the mic.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, yeah, we're content with the exclusion of others, but I also think that we're just blind to it. We choose not to see it, because if we see it, then there's work to be done and we don't want to do the work. That's how I'm feeling about that. And this speaks throughout all different types of people that feel like they're excluded. I am like recovered from alcohol and drugs for 15 years. I worked as an addiction support worker for a few years and a at-risk youth worker. And a huge heart that I have is for the people that come from a diverse background of a lot of darkness, that feel like they can't come to church because they don't look the part. They've got the tattoos, they're swearing, they're smoking, they're still smoking weed, whatever it be. They don't feel like they can come in and just take a seat because all of the good looking church people that look so perfect are going to judge them or not want them there. And I'd love to say that that's just their perspective and that's not real. But the reality is that we are kind of judgy when it comes to other people coming in and sitting down at the church. And so I love that you're talking about this and bringing this up, because it bleeds into so many different aspects of us as Christians, as believers. And when Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me, we should be white knuckling it and holding on so tight to what we want or what Jesus wants of us, that we're pursuing him so wholeheartedly that it doesn't matter who's making a noise in the sanctuary when the pastor's up there talking. And something also that came to mind as I was listening to you share is that motherhood has changed me in so many
Mm.
ways and humbled me in so many ways. And earlier in the podcast, you mentioned like the best parents that could write the best parenting book are those that haven't had kids yet. That was me. I would think, just say no. Your kid should submit and listen to you and it will be fine. Um, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Like there's so many different aspects to it. And parenting has been such a humbling experience for me and such an opportunity to grow and to deal with things that I hadn't previously dealt with. And I like now when I go on a plane and if there's a young mom with a baby on a plane and the baby's just like, hating life up there in the sky, I intentionally go to her and I say, "You're doing a great job. Like you're doing great and you're essentially you're allowed to be here and your baby can cry about it and everybody can just suck it up and deal because children should be welcome, just as Jesus said, let the little children come." And I feel
Mm-hmm.
the same in the church service. If I hear a baby crying, I know personally I had so much anxiety and panic that I was interrupting everybody and everybody was judging me and hating me and I had to get out of the sanctuary fast because I was interrupting. And I like no, good riddance to that. Like let the little children come. They can be a little bit disruptive. People can make sounds and stuff, and it's not necessarily out of disrespect to the process of the sermon. Some like you're saying, like sometimes people are they're just going to make some noise or they're going to have a machine that's going to make some noise. Why is our pride so thick and heavy within our spirit? We've come there to worship the Lord, yet we're sitting there in our own pride thinking this isn't the way it should be. It should be
Mm-hmm.
quieter. Die to self, my friends. Die to self and serve the Lord, because the Lord would be bringing all of those people into the sanctuary and speaking with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Yeah, preach, Mel. Yeah, I think so. One pushback that I think someone will say,
Yeah.
not to you, but a listener might say is, well, what about orderliness in worship? Right? Doesn't Paul say that there should be order in worship? And I would say absolutely. And I think this doesn't mean, look, say I have my son with me and so my son loves music and he loves it to be in the room when the band is playing. And so we're trying to find ways with his support worker on church to get him in the room more and all this kind of stuff. Again, imperfect. Our church is not, we're not a paragon of awesomeness at this. But let's say that my son, I get up to preach and my son starts doing some of his vocalizing and he's frustrated. Maybe something's not working on his iPad. And so he starts getting upset. Like it would be kind to my son and to people around him to like help him when he's dysregulated to get regulated so he can come back in. So I'm not saying in the same way that, if there's a mom whose kid is just like wailing forever and she's ignoring or the dad is ignoring and not helping, well, okay, let's help the child with what they need. But that's not really like, I think most of us would be like, oh, let's provide the help that's needed in the moment. And sure, that's fine. But it's the problem, or what we're not trying, that would be disorderly worship, to just continue to allow people in the midst of their struggle to like not have their need met would be distracting. But sometimes we become so pharisaical with the approach that we take because out of fear for that child who might cry, out of fear for that disabled brother or sister in Christ who might become dysregulated, we say, let's fence it then. Let's fence the service so that they're far enough away that the potential of that won't even interrupt. And that's, I think, the part of us, we've so sterilized the church environment of the worship service to protect from anything that is outside of our control or outside of our predictability. There's a great sociological book from the mid 90s called The McDonaldization of Society. And, Christians have picked up on this, but it talks about these four things of how our society has become like McDonald's. We become efficient. We try to calculate things. We try to be predictable and we try to control things. And If that is not a definition of how most churches view Sunday mornings, I don't know what is. We try to be efficient with our time. We try to calculate things like butts and seats and money given. We try to provide predictable experiences for people so that they'll come back because they know that every Sunday they come, they'll get another Big Mac. And then we try to control what can happen there so that the efficiency, calculability, and predictability can all take place. And we become this machine, and we do it out of this impulse to worship the Lord and have the gospel go forward. Our motives are good, but the means that we use to try to get the ends of worshiping Christ and proclaiming his excellencies, the means we use have actually corrupted the ends. And this is the part that, like you said, Mel, like the church has to wake up to this. The church is dozing in the sanctuary about what I think will be the actual thing that helps compel people to become Christians in the 21st century in North America, is that we aren't this like perfectly run, perfectly polished environment that is part concert, part TED Talk with this brilliant content. We are a messy individual persons coming together because we only share Jesus in common. And we all have limitations. We all have weaknesses. We all have needs. We also all have contributions to bring. We also all have ways in which our presence, the Spirit of God will use our presence in a powerful way with other people simply because he's gifted us to do so. And the more you see the conversation of disability as just a Trojan horse for actual Christian anthropology, the more it unlocks our ecclesiology, the more it makes us ask questions like, what are we even doing here if that person can't participate? Because, you know, Protestant theology, we're saved by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone, like all of those alones. And then we as Protestants add on top of that, yeah, but you need to be able to communicate it properly. Yeah, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you believe these things properly. It's like, wait a second. Like, if we're true Protestants, we shouldn't need to have somebody be able to articulate perfectly the doctrines of grace for them to be a recipient of the doctrines of grace. And so who are we to so fence the experience? Because, well, I don't even know if that person's really a Christian. I hear this all the time when people are like, you know, you shouldn't call disabled people brothers and sisters in Christ because we don't know if they're a true believer or not. And I want to say, I don't know if anybody's a true believer or not. Like, I don't know if you are. Like, I don't know if sometimes I don't know if I am. So like what we're going to attach onto the doctrines of grace, this like cognitive capacity that they have to like be able to check a box to prove that the Spirit of God dwells within them. I'm like, I don't want to have that responsibility. I would rather let the people who want to come near Jesus be near Jesus and trust that the Spirit of God will work through the gifts he's given the body to make the church who he's wanted the church to be. And I'm persuaded, I have full conviction that one of the reasons why the North American church is toxically unhealthy is we have categorically and consistently rejected parts of the body. And therefore we are rejecting gifts that God has intended to give to the body for the building up of the body. And then we wonder why we're sick. And the reason why we're sick is because we're saying you don't belong.
Yeah, and humans seem to do that so easily, where we'll size things up and determine what is worthy of being included. I just like, it's a human problem that we have, where we want, even like you think in high school or whatever, everyone wants to be a part of the popular crowd. I don't know why. Like, we just have this idea, even like helping people, you know, we want to help somebody that, you know, looks nice in some aspect, or, you know, a rich friend has a problem, you want to help them. But to go to the homeless person on the side of the road that looks like they might be overdosing, like, we're like, oh, I don't know, I'll leave that for somebody else. And I mean, it's scary. I get it. People do die out there, and to have to face death is a scary thing. But I just find it interesting how our natural reaction is to find things that we deem worthy of our attention, to give it attention. And I think that that is something that the Lord will refine in us and set us in the right course when we seek out the heart of Christ, because the
Mm,
heart of Christ will go next to every person, everybody. And I love the idea of, okay, so Troy Lydiot has a song that he wrote called Low Seat, and I love that song.
mm,
But basically it's like, the Bible talks about it, so yeah. But like sitting down at the low seat, and then if you get called up to the head of the table, then that's like you're honored. But if you take the head of the table and then you're, oh, that's actually been saved for somebody else, like that's awkward. So taking the low seat, choosing to humble yourself before the Lord, pursuing the heart of Christ in all things, and asking God for the opportunity to serve every part of the body of Christ. And what does
mm,
that look like? And for me, after this conversation, I want to be more intentional with coming alongside people that are experiencing disabilities within the church and talking to them. And so I say thank you, Greg, for joining me and helping me to understand a new perspective. And, I hope that this conversation helps others that are listening to step out of that fear bubble and choose to have faith and choose to have courage and to be the hands and feet of Jesus for somebody that they may encounter either in church or just in the daily life, of just saying hello and how are you, and just giving somebody time and space to know that they are seen and valued and worth the time and effort.
hmm Can I give one quick plug?
Yeah,
So
do.
we're out here in Western Canada, for those of you who are listening. Uh, and so Western Canada, Canada in general, and Western Canada in particular, is pretty weak in the area of disability theology and ministry. And so I have some friends and I were working to change that. So there's this group called the Lazarus Center. We call it Lazarus because there's two Lazaruses in the Bible. One is the Lazarus who was outside the gates, who was ignored, and who, the rich guy ignored, but who was actually a friend of God. And Lazarus was in paradise while the rich man was not. But then the other Lazarus is the friend of Jesus, who Jesus called out from the tomb. And so Lazarus is our call to help wake up the church, to get out of the tomb, to take off the grave clothes, and to see the Lazarus in our midst, who has a special place in the Lord's heart, who we often disregard. And so if you are interested, there's different kinds of events. We're working on doing some fundraising. We want to hire some staff. We want to have it be, so I'm kind of on the steering team that helped get it going, but I'm not on the staff. We have some great staff. One person named Krista Ewert, she's our director. She has a kiddo with disabilities. We have our co-director, I think is her title, Sarah Wardlaw. She lives with cerebral palsy, I think, and she's an amazing spokesperson for self advocate for the disability theology world. If this conversation has interested you and you want to continue on the conversation, you want to see how to be plugged in, just Google the Lazarus Center. We're on Instagram, and we'd love to see you out at an event. And if you feel compelled to give to us, you can get a charitable receipt, because we're under Northwest Baptist College and Seminaries kind of money. So just look us up, and we would love to keep the conversation going with you.
Yeah, and I can put that all in the show notes for sure.
Perfect.
That's awesome. Yeah, great conversation today. It empowers me to be better at including
Mm,
other people that maybe I wouldn't at first feel like I want to. So thank
mm.
you for challenging me and encouraging me in that. And I hope the listeners feel the same. I really enjoyed this conversation. And if you have any closing words before we close out, that'd be great.
I would say in close, to just, like, the point of the church and the point of the Christian life is Jesus. And and it isn't a cause, it's not a movement, it's not to be an activist. At the end of the day, the point is it is all centered on the person, the work, the beauty, the glory of Jesus. And what disability theology and ministry is trying to do is, Mark 2, we're trying to tear open the roof so that people who don't normally get access to Jesus can get access to Jesus, because he loves them so much, and he is the hope for their life. And when he gets a hold of their heart, he will work in them and through them for his purposes, just like he does each one of us. And so the disability conversation is just the human conversation, and the human conversation is about Jesus first and Jesus centered, and Jesus always.
So good. Thank you so much, Greg. All right, listeners, that's all we have for you today. Be sure to subscribe, like, follow, comment, all of those things. Leave a rating and review so Rekindled Faith can reach more people. And yeah, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.